The year was 1546, and winter's icy grip held fast to the small village of Thornfield. Snow blanketed the thatched rooftops and cobblestone paths, but the bitter cold outside could not match the chill that had settled in Olivia Caldwell's heart. At 23 years of age, she had already known more sorrow than many faced in a lifetime. The plague had swept through her village 6 months prior, leaving her a widow with a young son, Henry, just 5 years old. Olivia stood at the threshold of her humble cottage, her slender fingers clutching a tattered piece of parchment. Her long golden hair cascaded down her back, partially covered by a threadbare shawl that did little to shield her from the cold. Despite the hardships she had endured, Olivia's beauty remained unmarred. High cheekbones, full lips, and eyes as blue as a summer sky. Her worn dress hung loosely on her frame, the neckline frayed, but revealing the gentle curve of her collarbone. Though poverty had claimed much from her, it could not diminish the natural grace with which she carried herself. "Mother, are we leaving?" Henry asked, his small hand tugging at her skirts. The boy had his father's dark hair and her blue eyes, a painful reminder of the husband she had lost. "Yes, my love," Olivia replied, kneeling down to his level. "We have been given a new home." The letter had arrived 3 days ago, delivered by a stern-faced messenger who seemed eager to depart from their poverty-stricken corner of the village. It spoke of an inheritance, a small plot of land with a cottage and farm left to her by a great-uncle she had never met. Located near the edge of the forest, half a day's journey from Thornfield, it was described as modest but suitable for a woman of your circumstances. With no means to support herself and Henry in the village, Olivia had packed their meager belongings and prepared for their journey. The neighbors had watched with a mixture of pity and relief as they departed. Another mouth they would not have to worry about feeding during the harsh winter months. The journey was arduous, particularly with a young child, but by midday, they crested a small hill and beheld their inheritance. Olivia's heart sank at the sight. What had been described as a modest cottage was little more than a dilapidated hovel. The thatched roof had collapsed in places, and the stone walls were crumbling. The surrounding land appeared barren and overgrown, with only a small, murky pond visible beyond a tangle of dead vegetation. "Is that our new home?" Henry asked, his voice small and uncertain. Olivia swallowed her disappointment. "Yes, but we shall make it beautiful," she promised, though she had no idea how she would fulfill such a vow. As they approached, a low growl emanated from within the decrepit structure. Olivia pulled Henry behind her protectively, but her fear gave way to surprise when a large, shaggy dog emerged from the shadows. It was thin and dirty, with patches of fur missing, but its eyes held intelligence rather than malice. "Look, Mother, a dog!" Henry exclaimed, his earlier apprehension forgotten. The dog approached cautiously, sniffing at them before allowing Henry to pet its matted fur. A crude collar around its neck bore the name Baxter. "It seems we have inherited a guardian as well," Olivia said, offering the animal a small piece of bread from their provisions. The dog accepted it gratefully, and in that moment, a bond was formed between the broken family and the abandoned animal. The interior of the cottage proved to be as disheartening as its exterior. A single room with a dirt floor, a collapsed bed frame, and a hearth filled with ashes greeted them. In one corner sat a wooden trunk, its surface covered in dust and cobwebs. It was secured with a rusted lock that broke easily when Olivia struck it with a stone. Inside the trunk, she found a collection of items that seemed to have belonged to her great-uncle, clothing too worn to be of use, several jars of preserved herbs, and beneath it all, a leather-bound journal. The first page bore the name Ezekiel Caldwell and the date 1510, some 36 years earlier. As Henry and Baxter explored the perimeter of their new home, Olivia thumbed through the journal's pages. Most entries detailed the daily life of a solitary farmer, records of plantings and harvests, weather patterns, and occasional visits to the village. Nothing extraordinary until she reached an entry dated June 1512. "The men came again today. They believe I know nothing of what they have done. They speak freely near me, thinking me a simpleton. But I have ears and eyes. I know what they buried, and I know why they watch me. They will not find what they seek, for I have moved it where none would think to look." Olivia's brow furrowed as she read the cryptic entry. What had these men buried? And what had her great-uncle moved? She continued reading, but found no immediate explanation, only more mysterious references scattered throughout the journal. The next few days were spent making the cottage habitable. Olivia repaired what she could of the roof, cleared debris from the floor, and fashioned a sleeping area from straw and the few blankets they had brought with them. Henry proved surprisingly helpful, his small hands gathering kindling for the fire and assisting in cleaning the single cracked window that allowed light into their new home. Baxter, too, seemed determined to contribute. Each morning, he would disappear for hours, returning with small game, rabbits or squirrels, which provided much-needed sustenance. But the dog's most peculiar behavior involved the pond. Multiple times a day, Baxter would run to its edge, bark insistently, and look back at Olivia as if expecting her to follow. "What is it, boy?" she would ask, but the dog would only whine and paw at the muddy shore. On the fifth day, as Olivia was attempting to clear a small patch of ground for a spring garden, she heard Henry shriek. Dropping her makeshift hoe, she ran toward the sound, heart pounding in her chest, only to find her son standing by the pond, pointing excitedly. "Mother, look what Baxter found." The dog had emerged from the water carrying something in his mouth. He dropped it at Henry's feet, a small metal box, covered in mud and algae. Olivia carefully picked it up, brushing away the grime to reveal ornate engravings on its surface. "What is it?" Henry asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. "I am not certain," Olivia replied, examining the box. It was sealed tight, with no obvious way to open it. "Let us take it back to the cottage." That evening, after Henry had fallen asleep, Olivia examined the box more closely by firelight. The engravings depicted a family crest, a falcon perched upon a shield, that she did not recognize. After considerable effort, she managed to pry it open, revealing a folded piece of parchment inside. The letter was dated 1511 and addressed to her great-uncle, Ezekiel. "You alone have earned my trust. The burden I place upon you is great, but necessary. Keep safe what I have entrusted to you. They believe it lost in the fire, and it must remain so until my son comes of age. The map enclosed will guide you to the location. Tell no one. Your loyalty shall not go unrewarded. Lord Xavier Harrington." Beneath the letter lay a smaller, more weathered piece of parchment, a crudely drawn map. Olivia recognized the outline of the pond and cottage, but there were additional markings she could not decipher and references to landmarks that no longer seemed to exist. A sense of unease settled over her. What had her great-uncle been hiding for this Lord Harrington? And who were they, the men mentioned in the journal, who came looking? The next morning, a visitor arrived at the cottage. He was a well-dressed man astride a magnificent black stallion, his attire marking him as someone of means and status. He introduced himself as Xavier Harrington III, magistrate of the neighboring county. "I heard news of Ezekiel's passing and that his property had been claimed by a relative," he said, his gaze sweeping critically over Olivia. Despite her disheveled appearance and simple dress, she felt uncomfortably exposed under his scrutiny, conscious of how the worn neckline of her garment revealed more than was proper. "I was acquainted with your great-uncle and thought to pay my respects to his successor." There was something in his tone that Olivia found unsettling. "That is most kind of you, sir," she replied cautiously. "Though I confess, I never had the opportunity to meet my great-uncle." "A pity," Xavier said, dismounting. "Ezekiel was a unique individual, kept to himself mostly, but was known to be trustworthy. A man who could keep secrets." The emphasis he placed on the last word sent a chill down Olivia's spine. She thought of the metal box and map hidden beneath her sleeping pallet. "I've been considering purchasing this land," Xavier continued, his eyes now surveying the property with barely concealed interest. "It adjoins my own estate, you see. I would offer you a fair price, enough to establish yourself comfortably in the village." "That is most generous," Olivia replied, "but I have only just arrived. I should like some time to settle before making such decisions. A flicker of annoyance crossed Xavier's handsome features, quickly masked by a polite smile. Of course. Consider my offer open. I shall return in a fortnight to hear your decision. As he mounted his horse, he added, almost casually, I would advise against disturbing too much of the land. Ezekiel was somewhat eccentric in his later years. Dug all manner of holes and trenches for reasons known only to himself. Would not want you or your boy to have an accident. With that warning hanging in the air, he departed, leaving Olivia with more questions than answers. That night, after ensuring Henry was asleep, Olivia studied the map by candlelight, comparing it to what she had observed of their surroundings. The pond was clearly marked, as was the cottage, but there were additional features indicated that she had not yet identified. A large oak tree with a distinctive split trunk, a circle of stones, and what appeared to be a small structure some distance from the cottage. As she contemplated these mysteries, Baxter suddenly raised his head, ears perked. A low growl rumbled in his chest as he moved toward the door. Olivia extinguished the candle and peered through a crack in the wall. In the pale moonlight, she could make out two figures moving stealthily around the perimeter of the property, careful to stay in the shadows. Her pulse quickened. Were these the men her great-uncle had written about? Had they returned to search for whatever had been hidden? She remained perfectly still, barely breathing, until the figures eventually retreated into the forest. Sleep eluded her that night, her mind racing with possibilities and fears. By dawn, she had made a decision. She would uncover whatever secret lay hidden on her land before Xavier Harrington returned. If it was valuable enough for men to skulk about in the night, perhaps it could provide the means for her and Henry to build a better life. Over the next several days, Olivia devoted herself to exploring the property, using the map as her guide. She located the split oak tree mentioned on the map, though it had fallen years ago, and was now partially decomposed. The circle of stones proved more difficult to find, buried beneath years of accumulated soil and vegetation. Henry and Baxter became her eager accomplices in this treasure hunt, though the boy believed it to be merely a game. The dog seemed to possess an uncanny understanding of their purpose, often leading them to areas of interest, his nose to the ground as if following some scent imperceptible to humans. It was on the 6th day of their exploration that Henry made a discovery. While playing near what appeared to be the remains of a small outbuilding, little more than a foundation of stones now, he called out excitedly, "Mother! Mother! Look what I found!" Olivia hurried to his side to find him pointing at a small opening between two large stones. Baxter was already there, pawing eagerly at the ground. "Be careful, Henry," she warned, pulling him back slightly. "There might be animals living in there." Baxter continued to dig, earth flying between his paws. As the hole widened, Olivia could see that it led to a small, man-made cavity beneath the stones. Reaching in cautiously, her fingers touched something solid, a wooden box, similar in size to the metal one Baxter had found in the pond, but much older and more weathered. With trembling hands, she pulled it from its hiding place. Unlike the first box, this one opened easily, the wood having warped with age and moisture. Inside lay a yellowed parchment, folded around a small object. Olivia carefully unfolded the document to reveal an official-looking deed, bearing the seal of the English crown. It declared that the lands of Harrington Hall and all its holdings were granted in perpetuity to Lord Xavier Harrington I and his heirs. But what caught Olivia's attention was a handwritten note in the margin, this copy to be kept safe, as proof against those who would usurp what is rightfully my son's. Wrapped within the deed was a gold signet ring, bearing the same falcon crest she had seen on the metal box. The ring was heavy and clearly valuable, but its significance clearly went beyond mere monetary worth. "What is it, Mother?" Henry asked, trying to peer at her discovery. "I believe it is part of a very old story," Olivia replied, carefully rewrapping the ring and the deed and placing them back in the box. "A story we are only beginning to understand." That night, after Henry was asleep, Olivia returned to her great-uncle's journal, searching for any mention of Lord Harrington or his son. She found an entry dated August 1512. Lord H's son, young Xavier, visited today. Just a boy of 10, but with his father's bearing. Asked questions about his father's visits, what we spoke of. Sharp lad. Told him nothing, of course. His father's enemies still live and would not hesitate to harm the boy to gain what they seek. Better he knows nothing until he is of age to defend what is rightfully his. Subsequent entries referenced visits from young Master Xavier over the years, his gradual growth into manhood, and his increasing resemblance to his father. The final mention came in an entry from 1528. Xavier came today, now a man grown. Spoke of reclaiming his father's title and lands. Asked if I still kept what his father entrusted to me. I told him all was safe, but the time not yet right. Too many of the old enemies still hold power at court. He must be patient. He did not like this answer, but I hold firm. I made a promise to his father, and I shall keep it until I draw my last breath. Olivia set the journal down, her mind reeling. The Xavier Harrington who had visited her, who claimed to be a magistrate and wanted to buy her land, was he the same young Xavier mentioned in the journal? If so, why had he not simply claimed what his father had hidden? Unless he did not know exactly what had been hidden or where to find it. Her thoughts were interrupted by Baxter's low growl. Once again, shadowy figures moved about outside the cottage. This time, however, they were more brazen, approaching the dwelling directly. Olivia quickly hid the boxes and journal beneath her pallet, then grabbed the small knife she used for cooking and stood protectively near Henry's sleeping form. A knock came at the door, firm and demanding. Baxter's growl deepened, his hackles raised. "Who calls at this hour?" Olivia asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Open in the name of the magistrate," came the reply, a man's voice, gruff and authoritative. With no choice but to comply, Olivia unbarred the door. Two men entered, one tall and lean, the other shorter and stocky, both dressed in the manner of officials, though their appearances suggested otherwise. "We serve Magistrate Harrington," the taller man announced. "He sent us to check on your welfare, as he was concerned about strangers seen prowling about the property." The lie was so transparent that Olivia almost laughed. These were undoubtedly the same strangers who had been watching her cottage. "How thoughtful of the magistrate," she replied, keeping her expression neutral. "As you can see, we are quite well. Please convey my gratitude for his concern." The shorter man's eyes darted around the cottage, taking in every detail. "The magistrate mentioned you might have found some items belonging to the previous occupant. Old documents, perhaps, or artifacts. He would be most interested in preserving anything of historical significance." "I have found nothing beyond some worn clothing and farming tools," Olivia lied, her hand tightening around the knife hidden in the folds of her skirt. The men exchanged glances, clearly disbelieving but unwilling to challenge her directly. "Very well," the taller one said. "Should you discover anything of note, the magistrate requests you bring it directly to him. For safekeeping, of course." After they departed, Olivia barred the door and sank to the floor, her heart pounding. These men were searching for the same items her great-uncle had hidden. The question now was why. What made these documents and the rings so valuable that men would still be hunting for them decades later? The following day, Olivia decided to visit the village nearest her property, hoping to learn more about the Harrington family and the history of the area. Leaving Henry in the care of Baxter, she made the hour-long walk to Millfield, a small settlement consisting of a few dozen cottages, a church, and a tavern. At the tavern, the Whistling Crow, she found the locals initially wary of a stranger, but they warmed to her after she purchased a round of ale with one of the few coins she had brought with her. The tavern keeper, a jovial man named Thomas, proved particularly informative. "Harrington Hall?" he repeated when she casually inquired about the estate. "Aye, grand place it was in its day. Burned down. Oh, must be 35 years ago now. Terrible tragedy. Lord Harrington perished in the flames, along with his wife." "And their son?" Olivia asked, recalling the journal entries. Thomas nodded. "Young Xavier survived, being away at the time. but the estate was seized by the crown, something about unpaid taxes and debts. The boy was taken in by relatives, I believe. Returned years later as a man, managed to secure a position as magistrate, but never recovered his family's lands or title. And the current magistrate Harrington, he is this same Xavier? Olivia pressed. The very same, Thomas confirmed. Right, determined fellow. Been buying up land all around the old Harrington estate over the years. Some say he means to rebuild the hall and restore his family's name. As Olivia prepared to leave, an elderly woman who had been sitting quietly in the corner approached her. You ask many questions about the Harringtons, she observed, her rheumy eyes sharp with intelligence. Are you a relation?
No, Olivia replied.
I recently inherited my great-uncle's property near the forest, Ezekiel Caldwell. The old woman's eyes widened slightly. Ezekiel's land, you say? Interesting. You might want to know that your great-uncle and the old Lord Harrington were close as brothers, despite the difference in their stations. Some said Ezekiel knew more about what really happened the night of the fire than he ever told. What do you mean? Olivia asked, intrigued. The woman glanced around cautiously before continuing in a lower voice. There were rumors that the fire was not an accident, that Lord Harrington had enemies who wished him ill. Powerful enemies at court who coveted something he possessed, proof of his rightful claim to lands much more valuable than Harrington Hall itself. Olivia thought of the deed hidden in her cottage. And what became of these enemies? Oh, they prospered, the old woman replied with a bitter smile. One in particular, Lord Edmund Crawford, was granted large portions of what had been Harrington land by the Crown after the fire. He died some years ago, but his son, George Crawford, now holds those lands and has the ear of the king himself. With this new information, Olivia returned to her cottage, her mind racing with possibilities. The story was beginning to take shape. Lord Harrington had entrusted documents to her great-uncle, proof of his rightful ownership of lands that were subsequently seized and redistributed after his death. His son, Xavier, had returned as an adult, determined to reclaim his birthright, but lacking the evidence to support his claim. That evening, as she related an edited version of her discoveries to Henry, omitting the more dangerous elements, the boy surprised her with an observation. If the papers and ring belong to the magistrate, should not we give them back to him, mother? Is that not the right thing to do? Olivia hesitated. Sometimes, Henry, knowing what is right is not so simple. We must be certain the magistrate is who he claims to be, and that these items truly belong to him. Henry frowned, struggling with this complexity. How will we know? We shall have to discover more of the truth, Olivia replied, stroking his dark hair. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor, a young woman named Sarah, who introduced herself as a maid from Magistrate Harrington's household. She carried a basket containing bread, cheese, and smoked meats. The magistrate sends these with his compliments, she explained, and wishes to know if you have reconsidered his offer to purchase your land. Olivia invited her in, grateful for the provisions, but wary of the messenger's purpose. As they sat at the crude table Olivia had fashioned from salvaged wood, Sarah's eyes darted nervously about the cottage. Is something troubling you? Olivia asked, noting the young woman's anxiety. Sarah hesitated before leaning forward. I should not speak of this, but there is something not right at the magistrate's house. Late-night meetings with men who look more like thieves than officials. Documents and maps spread across his table, all concerning this area. And he speaks of your land constantly, saying it must be acquired at any cost. Why are you telling me this? Olivia asked, surprised by the maid's candor. Because my grandmother knew Ezekiel Caldwell, Sarah replied. She always said he was a good man who kept faith with those who trusted him. And because... She glanced at Henry, who was playing with Baxter near the hearth. Because I have a brother Henry's age, and would not see harm come to a child. After Sarah's departure, Olivia was more confused than ever. If Xavier Harrington was indeed the son of Lord Harrington, why would he resort to such methods to recover what was rightfully his? Why not simply approach her honestly? Unless, she realized with a chill, The Xavier Harrington who now served as magistrate was not the true heir at all. That night, Olivia made a decision. She would take the documents and ring directly to the nearest city, where higher authorities might determine their true owner and significance. But before she could implement this plan, fate intervened in the form of a violent storm that swept through the region, bringing torrential rain and howling winds. As water began to seep through the partially repaired roof, Olivia moved their bedding to the driest corner of the cottage. It was then that Henry made another discovery. "Mother, look," he exclaimed, pointing to where the water had pooled on the dirt floor. As it seeped into the ground, it revealed something beneath, a section of wooden planking, previously hidden by the packed earth covering it. Together, they scraped away the sodden soil to reveal a trapdoor, its handle rusted but intact. With effort, Olivia managed to lift it, revealing a small storage space beneath the cottage floor. Inside lay another wooden box, larger than the previous ones. Lightning illuminated the cottage interior as Olivia lifted the box from its hiding place. This one was secured with a lock that required a key. She thought of the signet ring and, on a hunch, pressed its flat surface against a small depression in the lock. To her amazement, it fit perfectly, and with a twist, the lock opened. Inside the box lay a collection of documents far more extensive than those they had previously found. There were letters, maps, and legal papers, all bearing the Harrington seal. But most significantly, there was a journal, not her great-uncle's, but that of Lord Xavier Harrington I himself. As the storm raged outside, Olivia read by candlelight, the story of the Harrington family unfolding before her eyes. Lord Harrington had been the legitimate holder of vast lands granted by the Crown, including valuable mining rights. But he had made enemies at court, particularly Edmund Crawford, who coveted these holdings. Crawford had conspired with others to forge documents questioning Harrington's claim, and when that failed, had arranged for the fire that claimed Lord Harrington's life. The journal detailed all of this, along with the names of Crawford's co-conspirators and evidence of their crimes. Most shocking of all was the revelation that the young Xavier Harrington, heir to the estate, had also perished in the fire, contrary to what Olivia had been told. Lord Harrington's final entry, dated the very day of the fire, expressed his fear that both he and his son were in immediate danger. "Should the worst befall us, Ezekiel has sworn to protect the truth until it can be revealed to proper authorities. Crawford believes my son to be away from the hall, providing us some small advantage. I have instructed a trusted servant to claim that Xavier survived should anything happen to us, to buy time for Ezekiel to secure the evidence." Olivia sat back, stunned by the implications. If young Xavier had died alongside his father, then who was the man now calling himself Xavier Harrington III? The answer came in the form of a letter tucked into the back of the journal, addressed to Ezekiel and dated some years after the fire. "My dear friend, I write with grave news. A young man has appeared at court claiming to be Xavier Harrington, son of our departed friend. He has Crawford's support, which alone makes me suspicious. I believe him to be an impostor, possibly a distant relation groomed by Crawford to serve his purposes. He lacks the birthmark on his right shoulder that the true Xavier possessed, a mark you yourself once commented upon when the boys swam in your pond. Be on your guard. They will surely seek what you protect. Your faithful friend, William." The pieces fell into place with terrible clarity. The magistrate was an impostor, likely placed in his position by the Crawford family to maintain their hold on the stolen lands. No wonder he was so eager to purchase Ezekiel's property. He feared what might be hidden there. Olivia's determination hardened. She would expose this fraud and seek justice for the true Harrington family. But how to proceed safely, with Henry to protect? The opportunity came 3 days later, when a royal messenger passed through the village, carrying communications to and from the court. Olivia approached him with a carefully composed letter, addressed to the king's justiciar, outlining what she had discovered and including copies of some of the more damning documents. She kept the originals hidden, insurance against those who might wish to silence her. What she had not anticipated was the swiftness of the response. Within a week, a contingent of royal guards arrived at her cottage, led by a stern-faced official who introduced himself as Sir Richard Pembroke, representative of the King's Justice. "We have investigated your claims, Mistress Caldwell," he informed her after examining the documents she provided. "They align with suspicions that have long been held regarding the Crawford family's acquisition of the Harrington lands. The man calling himself Xavier Harrington has been detained for questioning." Relief washed over Olivia, quickly followed by concern. "What will happen now?" "Justice will be served," Sir Richard replied. "The Crawford family's ill-gotten gains will be forfeit to the crown. As for you and your son—" He paused, studying her with newfound respect. "The king recognizes your service in bringing this matter to light. As there are no surviving Harrington heirs, and in recognition of your great-uncle's loyalty to the true Lord Harrington, you have been granted title to this land and a portion of the reclaimed Harrington estate, enough to provide comfortably for you and your son for the remainder of your days." 30 years later, the village of Thornfield marveled at the transformation of Ezekiel Caldwell's humble property. What had once been a dilapidated cottage was now Caldwell Manor, a prosperous estate known for its bountiful harvests and the generosity of its mistress. Olivia Caldwell, now in her 53rd year, had never remarried, devoting herself instead to raising her son and managing their lands. Henry, grown to manhood, had studied law and now served as an advisor to the crown, his integrity and keen intellect earning him respect throughout the realm. Few remembered the young widow who had arrived with nothing but a small boy and an inheritance that had seemed worthless. Fewer still knew the full story of how she had uncovered a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of society. But on the day Olivia finally revealed the complete collection of documents and artifacts she had safeguarded all those years, donating them to the Royal Archives as a historical record, the villagers were shocked to learn what the seemingly ordinary peasant woman had hidden beneath her humble cottage. The Harrington signet ring, however, remained with Olivia. She wore it on a chain around her neck, a reminder of the secrets that had changed her life and a symbol of the justice she had helped to deliver. And Baxter, who had lived to a remarkable age for a dog, was buried beneath the old oak tree on the property, honored as the faithful companion who had first led them to the truth. In the evenings, Olivia would often sit by the pond, now cleared and teeming with fish, and reflect on the strange turns her life had taken. From destitution to prosperity, from grief to contentment, her journey had been extraordinary. Yet in her heart, she remained the same Olivia who had stood at the threshold of a ruined cottage all those years ago, determined to forge a life for herself and her son, no matter what challenges lay ahead. And if the villagers whispered that there was something magical about the Caldwell estate, something that brought good fortune to those who lived there, Olivia would simply smile and say that the greatest magic of all was the power of truth to prevail, even after 30 years of silence.